Non-Americans of Reddit, what is something about America that surprised you in a good way? That was my answer too. The landscapes are absolutely awe-inspiring, and such a range of beautiful natural areas from redwood forests to deserts, from prairies to mountains to the Everglades. The stunning beachscapes on the East Coast soothe soul. Enormous lakes, waterfalls. The natural beauty is profound in the U.S. and I don't think we from outside hear enough about it. The U.S. culture and politics is so pervasive in other countries, it's all we really hear about, which is a shame. Edit. Wow, thanks for the awards and all the nice replies and comments. To clarify the state abbreviations, I'm leaving them unaltered below. I meant Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire and New York. We made it as far north as Ogunquit. Me, ate lobsters almost daily, crashed the car in Salem outside Boston, took down a telephone pole too, and on our last day 2 hookers stole my wallet right outside our hotel in NYC. When someone is literally squeezing your balls, you tend to not notice someone else emptying your pockets. It was an awesome trip, nice to relive it through Reddit, but now I feel like actually repeating it. First time in the US, my brother and I, from Norway, went on a road trip around New England and upstate New York. By chance we spent our first night in Mystic Court, a year or so after the movie Mystic Pizza. It was the night of my 23rd birthday, and we ended up in a small bar full of locals, pretty much the only tourists, out-of-towners in the place. During a trip to the bathroom, my brother had told the bartender it was my birthday, and when I came out the entire bar was singing happy birthday to me, and I was served a giant piece of cheesecake. I was completely taken by surprise and it was a great experience. Most Americans are very friendly to strangers in my experience. We had 3 great weeks in court, MNE and NY. On holiday with my family to America, can't remember which part, we visited once a year for 8 years or something. Anyway, I must have been about 8-10 years old, but I dropped my wallet on the ground and carried on walking. Someone behind me flagged me down and gave it back. I remember being surprised they didn't just walk off with it. Maybe they would have if I was an adult. I don't know. I met lots of nice people over there. So that, I guess, looking at you through social media, Americans seem like the absolute worst, but when I was actually there, everyone was just so super nice. I'll see here. People complain that Americans are too loud, but that can actually sometimes be a good thing. There's been so many times when someone is being annoying in public, but nobody here says anything because we don't want to start a scene. I feel like an American would just tell the annoying person to shut up and actually fix the situation. American here. I did that in Paris when a Chinese family cut in line for the Louvre. It was a 2+ hour line and they just stepped in at the halfway mark. The British family in front of me spent a minute whispering, complaining to each other before I spoke up and yelled at the Chinese family a quick hey, and pointing back at the line after pointing at them, and they quickly walked away. Before COVID I was friends with an exchange student from South Korea. Luckily, the family he was staying with were kind enough to let me take him out to experience some of the American teenage life. Took him to see a drive-in movie, eat at dinners, bowling with friends, go to football games and parties. He loved how teenagers could just go out as friends and do so much and be so close, said that it was just like the movies. I can see why he was so pleasantly surprised. Drive-in movies do exist, but not so common. Bowling alleys exist, very common. Football games exist, duh, and parties do exist, uncommon. Put it all together, it must be memorable. A normal SK teenager's life is to go to school, go home only to set off for lessons such as tutoring or lectures from educational institutions. The day usually ends in a study carol. Students do hang out now and then in between. Popular places are a karaoke room, a room with the audio equipment for karaoke, or some tteokbokki, spicy, sweet red rice cakes, or to chat in a cafe or a PC bang, a place to play games, full of computers. You can order food to eat while playing video games. This was one of the great joys of my life when I lived in San Francisco. I'm a small-town Midwestern guy and looked like it. My roommates were from Detroit, Baltimore, and Oakland. The vast majority of the time we'd go out to an area with tourists, I was constantly stopped and asked for directions and made everyone wait while I drew a little map or something. It was always me they targeted. My friend would say your country bumpkin ass is asking for it, walking around smiling at strangers all day. I loved it, made me feel useful and like I could have a positive impact on a tourist's view of Americans. How friendly people were, even in big cities like NYC and LA, although I think my British accent may have been a contributing factor. Lol. The situation that sticks out the most was me and my other British friend were standing in line to get into a club in LA making casual small talk with each other when an American lady turned round and was like, "Oh my god, are you girls British? I love your accent." We spoke to her for a bit and she said she knew the DJ so would get us in VIP for free. She was so lovely, but my sketch radar did go off a little. But we accepted her invitation and had a great night and woke up alive the next day. It's funny because you can see how much this mob mentality thing is prevalent even with non-US countries. For example, I saw a post that painted the UK in a bad light, and the comments were filled with people saying British people in general are literal trash who don't deserve to have rights. I'm not even exaggerating. Happens all the time with China as well, or really any country that gets attached to bad headlines. People are so quick to throw away any nuance when discussing nations, despite them being made up of millions of unique individuals, many of which almost certainly don't fit whatever stereotype you've got floating around in your head. From studies I've read, it seems like this mentality is basically baked into our neurology as a remnant of our tribal origins, and that you have to actively be aware of this inherent but inaccurate bias to not fall prey to it. Unfortunately, I think the majority of people have very tribalistic mindsets. There's so much genuine hatred for abstract stereotypes. I don't see it as any different than racism. It's the same general principle. Not to say criticisms shouldn't be made. They absolutely should. But there's a big difference between British football culture promotes hooliganism far too much and British people as a whole are human scum. That's just a toxic mentality that ignores the reality of the individual, no matter which country you're applying it to. It's kind of funny how a post like this often invites a lot of well-traveled people to answer the questions, and they can provide an answer that doesn't paint us, or other countries for that matter, in a bad light. I'd be willing to bet that a majority of people that bash other countries on Reddit are the same people that haven't done much traveling, if any at all, and just fall victim to what they read on here instead of experiencing things for themselves. I am so glad to see the Junior Ranger program mentioned. It's an amazing part of the park service that definitely deserves attention, and yet I find people within the country who have no idea it exists. It's one of the best programs I've seen that gets children involved, and it also gives out sweet badges. Knowledge is everything, and getting future generations understanding ecosystems is definitely an awesome thing. As an aside, in most parks there is no age limit on who can be a Junior Ranger. Go ahead, ask at the desk. Be a 47-year-old Junior Ranger because the badges are sweet and the knowledge is forever. I live in one of the bigger cities in my area with about 2 hours of a large Canadian city. When the Canadian dollar is strong against the US dollar, we will see a very large influx of Canadians on the weekends. On day outside a very large liquor store here in town, US, I saw a couple with Manitoba plate get out of their vehicle as I was walking it. I made it in first and was checking specials posted near the entrance. The man walked about 3 feet in the door and just stopped in his tracks. I noticed his eyes pretty much glazed over at the sheer amount and variety of beers/wines/liquor/whiskey/cordials and the amounts this place had and the prices. I heard him say, "No wonder they're all alcoholics down here." Asian here, and the thing that surprised me the most when I visited the States, LA and Portland, is the food. My god, it's insane. I'm a pretty big dude. I lift a lot, so naturally I eat a lot as well. Out here I could normally have 2 servings of any meal and I'll be fine. Food in the States, on the other hand, is on an entirely different level. My uncle took me to IHOP once and I could barely finish the food he ordered. I don't even think it was that much. He just got us both a comically large drink and an entree, and that was basically what I ate for the entire day. It's actually way more tolerant, accommodating country than mainstream media makes it out to be. American mass media is run by people with a terribly jaundiced, unfairly negative view of America, especially in rural or southern areas. One show tried to play gotcha. They hired two child actors to sit in a restaurant in the Bible Belt, and one would tell the other that he thought he might be gay. The producers were hoping for bystanders to overhear it and flip out, but the only reaction was people saying things like "Jesus loves you." Ditto when they sent a Muslim, or an actor in Muslim garb, to a NASCAR race. Everyone was really nice to him. I know PPL in West Virginia whose grandparents or great-grandparents owned mineral rights, passed this stuff down to their kids, grandkids etc. This is a poorer state in America too. Anyway, one of them recently decided to sell her share. She only owned 1/5 of a claim. She still cleaned $180,000 lump sum just from her fifth. That shit's just crazy to me, but it happens. Espin counties with gas, oil wells OFC. From what I understand of the concept, having mineral rights did not necessarily mean you owned the acreage of that certain land on the top of that ground, just what was possible to mine from beneath the ground in that location. Living there does actually feel like being in a Hollywood movie, depending on which state. Seeing a corporal scared the living shit out of me, even when I know I did nothing wrong, which always made me behave super careful. I became an advocate where I side with USA in friends, family discussions and arguments, whom now believe I've become a westernized suck-up tool, where in fact I just love and respect the country at which I spent 6 years pursuing my higher education degrees. God bless USA. I'm generalizing from what I've heard from various European friends. It's more that other countries are less initially friendly in comparison to Americans. Not that they're surprised we're not cold. Many other countries are much more reserved in general and only truly open up to people they're very close to. I've heard Americans described as more outwardly friendly to strangers, but in a way that isn't fully genuine until you're close to them. Reputation that persisted for decades of the ugly American tourist did us a lot of damage. Especially in Europe. We used to have a reputation as being the rudest, nastiest tourists in the world. We've done a lot to rehabilitate our image since then, and now the Chinese have far overtaken us as the world's most hated tourists. But I'm pretty sure there's still a lot of PTSD out there from dealing with American Karens on vacation. There are a couple of incongruous stereotypes. There's the "have a nice day" thing that outsiders feel is kind of forced, so the niceness doesn't seem as genuine. Then there's the perception that America is either New York, where everybody is too busy to give you the time of day and you're likely to get shouted at from a top-floor apartment window. Or there's redneck, which doesn't exactly exude pleasantry. I'm not by any means saying any of that is true. As a Brit who now resides in the Lone Star State, people are nice. But before I came here, the perception was one of the two above and no in between. The reason why you hear a lot of crazy stuff that goes on in Florida is because A, it is the third most populous state in the country with over 21 million people, and B, Florida has perhaps the most open records of any other state. This means reporters can get a lot more information and browse more public records to find these sort of weird stories in the first place. I am American, but didn't move to the US until I was a teenager. As a kid, I remember seeing the clouds in cartoons and thinking they were exaggerations. It makes sense in cartoons, everything is exaggerated. In my mind, this is what clouds look like. Nope, motherfuckers. It turns out that clouds get freaking huge all the time. One time, I stood on a hilltop watching a thunderstorm roll in, because I was amazed that the clouds were lighting up just like they did in Fantasia. I thought that was artistic license. A couple of years ago my family, Asian, was driving in Bumfuck, America, which movies and the internet told me was full of racist hicks. At a gas station, I couldn't figure out how to pay by credit card. Gas is not self-service where we live, and couldn't get it to work. A middle-aged couple, both obese with the guy having a long beard, got out of their pickup truck which was full of gun stickers and walked up to me as I was getting frustrated with the machine. The first thing that came to my mind was, oh shit, we're gonna be driven out of town. The woman then demonstrated how to pay with the card, and when that didn't work, accompanied me inside so I could pay at the cashier. The man struck up a conversation with my dad and gave him tips on the drive, saying the route our GPS was showing was shit and to use another one instead. That day I learned that I was in fact the bigot for judging these people too quickly. Philanthropy and the idea of paying it forward. Americans have an extremely individualistic society. At the same time, American millionaires are the most generous. The Middle East and Asia are societies that revolve around family and community, but you don't hear of Saudi or Chinese millionaires building funds to encourage millionaire philanthropy. Warren Buffett, or dedicating years of research to building toilets aimed at revolutionizing water sanitation. I've seen latrines contaminate well water, and I couldn't be more excited that Bill Gates gives a crap and understands the implications of water, sanitation and hygiene. Going back to the pay-it-forward mentality, on a trip to Goodwill, while I studied in the U.S., the lady who was standing before me at the register asked the cashier to include the item I'd put on the counter on her bill. I was looking the other way and didn't hear her make the request, so when my turn came to pay, I was informed that the lady who'd just left the store had already paid for my item. I was dumbfounded. I ran outside to thank my anonymous benefactor, but the lady in question just brushed it off as nothing. "Just pay it forward," she yelled from across the parking lot, as she got into her car. That was my first time hearing this phrase. I later noticed other people doing similar acts of kindness. The father of the girl I was nannying, paying for the order of the next person at the drive-thru. Joining Reddit years ago, I remember someone telling a story about a benefactor helping them when their car broke down, and being instructed to pay it forward, or browsing through a sub called Random Acts of Kindness. Back home, we'll occasionally buy lunch or a nice pastry for a homeless person. I've seen my dad contribute to someone's grocery bill when they appeared short on change, but I never once witnessed these random acts of kindness. Like you have in the US, people will help those who appear to be in need, but not pay for a random person's meal/coffee/etc., when, for all they know, that stranger could be better off than them. The idea that you're just doing this random act to brighten a stranger's day, knowing that they'll likely return the gesture to another person, and so on and so forth, genuinely amazes me. Edit, thank you for the award. We'll pay it forward. Southern hospitality. Spent some time in Dallas a good few years back now while working. Almost every person I met was so amazingly polite. Being British, we noticed this shit. Even when confronted by the Karens and Chads of the world, couldn't do enough to help people, even when it wasn't their job. Just because it was the right thing to do, the good thing to do. They'd take that shit seriously there. Or did back then anyway. Haven't been back in a while. How people over there literally seem twice as friendly, and how open and vast the land is. Roads are wider. Everything green seems vibrant. Nice climate. Most homes have a nice style and are huge. Also that feeling of being in a country that really values freedom, Bill of Rights etc. It was refreshing. It was also good to see a country that's proud of their country. Flags were to be seen in a lot of places. I also remember seeing fireflies for the first time ever in Central Park. I was like, what was that? Some giant light in the air going on and off out of nowhere. It was cool. What can I say? I enjoyed my 2 weeks there. I miss it and hope to go again one day hopefully. I'm English. Things are pretty different here. I was in Vegas years ago eating at some shitty restaurant on Fremont, hungover and feeling more abused than the greasy food on my plate. I noticed my fountain drink was off. like the machine hadn't been cleaned in years, so I went to the front and asked for water instead. The woman working there refused and said I'd have to pay another $2.50 for a cup of water. Normally I'd advocate for myself, but I just wasn't feeling it, but I probably looked visibly annoyed. Well, this 6 feet 8 inches, 300 pounds plus dude stands up and comes to the counter beside me with his cup and also demands water. He lays into the person working there and starts demanding to see inside the fountain drink machine because it clearly hasn't been cleaned. Says something along the lines of it's 85 degrees outside and you can't give us water? You want me to come back there and get my own water? Well, we not only got water but bottled water. Thank you, giant stranger.